Today is Saturday, June the 5th. This might be a little bit longer than usual. I'm going to go through a couple of new stocks, and I want to talk about a couple of things like the McClellan Summation Index, and we're going to look at tip ranks for a couple of stocks as well. So the Dow Jones, you can see here, did not make a new closing high. It was actually rejected right at the previous closing high. That's a sign of strength, frankly. The NASDAQ has a way to go. If you look at this pullback right here, this was its closing high, but if you take its trading high, what did we do? We're approaching 78.6, but what's more important is Friday's support on the cloud right there. I mean, that's pretty significant. It dropped down at some point during the day to the cloud and then rallied higher. Important. The S&P, also, same as the Dow, rejection at the previous closing high, but look at the Chiku span. The Chiku span next week will be riding on top of these candles, but going into the week following, you have these candles that'll be support, and that could be a bounce, and we could be going higher. And I'm going to show you some other reasons why we think that might be so. Now, the Volatility Index, that's one of the things we looked at, and it's dropping now into the complacency zone for even further, which means the S&P goes up. Now, let's take a look at a couple of other things. We will look at the McClellan oscillator, which is starting to churn now in the middle between neutral and overbought. But let's take a look at the Summation Index. First of all, I want you to also read this article here. The NDX to S&P relative strength ratio. All he's saying is that when you divide the NASDAQ by the S&P and you plot that, it shows when the NASDAQ is outperforming the S&P. And you know that we've had a period now where the tech stocks, who had such a great year last year, look at this. The tech stocks really dominated. The FANG stocks were out of this world. But then we had some consolidation, some profit taking, some pullback. But now we see that starting to move up again. And he's saying that that's a good sign for the tech stocks, and that's usually a good sign for the market. Now let's look at the Summation Index. The Summation Index is defined right here. It's really, I misspoke in my last video. It's not the summation of the difference. It's the summation of all of the daily values of the McClellan oscillator. And I've been plotting the McClellan oscillator, and you can see this big turnaround that's occurred recently. Let's look at other turnarounds. We had a high here, then a low. A higher high, a higher low. Then we turned around and we had a lower high, a lower low where the market was underperforming, was flat. We had another lower high, another lower low, starting to drag on the market. This was a higher high, higher than this, and a higher low. So that's the Summation Index now is starting to turn around. And if we can see this type of movement, and we can start to make a new high above this line right here, then we're going to be looking for a higher high on this one. And while this happens, it means the McClellan oscillator is moving upwards, and the Summation Index is another way of tracking that. Now let's look at some stocks. Apple, rejection off the cloud, but the Chiku span is in the cloud. Part of our tech stock basket that we're holding on to, 78.6 was support. IBM, finally breaking out from this old Gartley pattern. Right here, this old Gartley pattern hit its D target, and it's finally breaking out. There is a second D target, which is up here at 154.23, and it could be heading to that. What typically happens after these Gartleys, this is called a bearish Gartley, because what happens after it is that the stock usually drops when it hits its target. It didn't happen this time, so that's a good positive sign. That's strength. I like IBM. I certainly like its dividend, but also look at the 50 moving average. It's starting to move into the cloud. And right around here, if it keeps moving up, the cloud and the 50 will coincide, which is going to be a magnet for testing support for IBM. NIO is one of the stocks that we're going to look at on tip ranks. I didn't see a Gartley pattern here, so I just asked, let me show you how this is done. Take this out. I asked MotiveWave to just find me a pattern in here somewhere. It didn't find a pattern. It did before. Come on. Let's find that. Let's say, find me a pattern in here. It still didn't. Find me a pattern in here. And it still didn't. Funny, because it did before, and it was showing an ABCD, but it wasn't really very convincing. So let's look at other factors. The 50 is finally turning up, avoiding that crash with the 200. That's strong. And now we've had a support on the 50%, support on the 68.1. Now this is a Fibonacci that's not drawn from the high, from the low to the highest high, because we started looking at it when it did this pull back to the 50, which was 68.1. So we knew that that was a good Fibonacci. So we keep it in place. What we didn't see was a move beyond 100 to some other kind of Fibonacci. And maybe this is a minor Fibonacci, but whatever. Is the Fibonacci still intact? Well, let's see. This didn't come down to the 50%, so that's not very convincing. And it really did quickly overshoot the 78.6. But now we see the 68.1, the 50, the 68.1. So I'm still looking at this Fibonacci, and I think that other traders may be looking at it as well. And now let's look at what they're saying on tip ranks. There are 8 analysts that follow NIO, and 7 of them are saying a buy, 1 saying a hold. The reason NIO got its big push this week was 4 days ago, so that was Monday. Citigroup and Morgan Stanley, not the best analysts in the world, 3 stars and 2 stars, upgraded it, but they're coming from good pedigree, Citigroup and Morgan. But we also have Vijay Rakesh, who a month ago assigned the stock for the first time with a buy and a $65 target. And that's where I have my short calls at 60. So that looks like a good stock, not only technically, but also with tip ranks. Let's look at Square. Square is a creature of the Ichimoku cloud. Look at the support here, also the 50 and the cloud. We saw that on an earlier stock. Now below the 50, but where did it get its support? On the cloud. Moved up here, lost the 50, but where did it get its support? Bottom of the cloud. Here it's getting support on the cloud as well. It's ignoring the 50 and getting support on the cloud. Now it's getting support on the 200. We now look for it to break the 50. That'll be the next thing that we want Square to do, is break that 50 and then start to move up before this cloud gets too deep and there's too much resistance. But look at this support, 27.2 on Fibonacci. The other stock that we were going to look at on tip ranks is SAVA, Casanova Biosciences. Remember, I was looking at ALEC. That was an Alzheimer's stock. And then I got rid of that, didn't see the pop that I wanted to, got into Sava. Something is happening with Sava. There is no Alzheimer drug that delays the onset of Alzheimer's beyond 60 days. They are going to present in July at a conference 90-day results. They wouldn't be showing 90-day results if they didn't have something promising for their small molecule that showed delaying the onset of Alzheimer's by 9 months. So that is encouraging. Look at this move. From no man's land between the 50 and the 200, it just moved up right around May. So we take a look at NIO, and what are we seeing? The stock analysis says that it's a rating of 10. It's got analyst ratings with a strong buy, bullish blogger, decreased hedge fund activity. There was only one hedge fund involved in it, so there's an opportunity there for hedge funds to jump into this stock, which would drive the stock higher. Insider activity, insiders bought shares. Now let's see when they bought shares. We look at informative sells and uninformative sells. Now here's the president who was selling 8 days ago, but it's an uninformative sell, meaning that it was probably something that was just timed. But informative buy is something that tip ranks determines from the pattern of what this director is doing, the timing, and it looks like he didn't just buy with some stock options. It looks like he actually paid some cash probably, and that was 2 months ago, just before the stock started to pop up. The other thing we want to look at is Casanova's website, and here they're talking about their 9-month data for cognition maintenance study on track for June 2021. This is their 9-month study, and on July 21st they plan to announce results for a pre-specified interim analysis. They're going to present that data at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference on the 26th to 29th. So up until that time, look for Casanova to move higher. I'm in this with a long August 60 and a short 80, and I've got 5 of those, and I think it's time to add more, and I'll look at that on Monday. Abbott, I'm still positive on Abbott because it's ABBV, which is a spin-off of Abbott Diagnostics. 50 acted as general support in here. It pulled back on Friday. Its 50 is starting to flatten out, but the 200 is still moving up. Look at its stochastic momentum indicators. Long-term going down, short-term, faster moving one going higher. So we should see a move up. And then we should see it come back down to test the cloud as the 50 moves into the cloud. So why not draw a little box here and in the future remind us to look at this point. That's where this longer term, slower moving stochastic should meet its support level, and then we'll see a turnaround. And in the meantime, the faster moving stochastic will hit a top, will hit a bottom coinciding with this one, and then they'll both start to move up. Remember, this moves much faster than the much slower moving stochastic. MP, if you looked at that one and got into that one when we called support on the 200, I didn't get into it, just doing other stocks, but it's still a good one. Look at that, stopping right at the cloud, and keep an eye on the Chiku span, which stops right here, which means that it's just below this candle right here. It should be able to pop out over the candles, and if it does that, then MP is still a buy, and it's a reasonable price, $31.64. So that's all I'm going to cover today. I am bullish on the market. Thanks if you're still with me after 20 minutes. I'm still bullish on the market. All my short calls are well out of the money. I see no need to hedge on any of my stocks. By selling well out of the money, I'm just collecting short-term premium. For example, I just rolled my Square short calls from this Friday to 2 Fridays out, the June expiry. One set for 50 cents, one set for 70 cents, and that's just like collecting a dividend on the stock. Hell, if Square gets to 250 from 213, who do you think is going to be very excited and quite glad to give up his stock? Me. So that's why I do it. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Hopefully I'll talk to you next week if there's something interesting to talk about.